Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Center Stage with ICS Theater. I'm your host Anahita Mantri, and I can't tell you how thrilled and excited I am to be presenting the show on behalf of ICS Theater. Let me start off with a little introduction into how this all began and what this show is all about. Whenever I try to put words to describe what this past year has been like, I just can't seem to find the right adjectives for it. It's been scary, crazy, chaotic, sad, calming, slowing down. It turned our lives upside down, but it gave us pause to think, to bow our heads to those who lost their lives during this time, and open our hearts to our heroes and scrubs who didn't give up no matter the odds. It seems like we missed out on a lot that we would have done otherwise, but it also seems like we did some things that we wouldn't have done otherwise. We learned new skills or honed old ones. This is one of those things. During this time, the world of Zoom opened up an array of possibilities for everyone, endless possibilities of collaborations near and far. And whether there's a pandemic or not, there's no stopping it now. ICS Theater has been working very hard through this past year, supporting the arts and keeping amateurs and artists engaged and immersed by all means possible. In fact, in a way, it has been a boon where artists from all around the world at times have collaborated for a project and come up with some amazing results and even been able to reach a much larger worldwide audience with literally just the touch of a button. This show, like many other ventures of ICS Theatre, was the brainchild of none other than our beloved Barkha Krishnani, the artistic director of ICS Theatre. A small seed of an idea suddenly took shape, and here we are. So let me get right down to business. In every episode of Center Stage with ICS Theatre, we spotlight a guest related to the world of theatre in some form or another, and we'll be chatting with them a little bit about theatre and a little bit about their personal lives. It is my absolute pleasure to bring to you a few minutes of respite, entertainment, and maybe some interesting insight about theatre. Our very first guest on our opening night is the director and professor of the Center for Asian Studies of the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. He has also served as a professor and chair of the Department of Theatre Arts at Stony Brook University, New York, and Michigan State University during his teaching career that spans over 4 decades. He has authored and published several books on theatre, the arts, and specifically on Kudiattam, the Sanskrit theatre of South India. He is regarded as one of the leading experts on traditional Indian performing arts and theatre in the Western world. Throughout his career, he has explored the theatrical arts of India and South Asia and has directed and staged many productions of both Western and Indian plays here in the US. So let us extend a very warm welcome to our first guest, Dr. Farley Richmond. Hello, Dr. Richmond. Welcome to Center Stage with ICS Theatre. How are you doing tonight?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. Dr. Richmond, when I read about all of your accomplishments, I was curious, and I'm sure many of our viewers like me might be wondering too. You have this very unique connection with the theatrical arts of India. You are recognized as an expert in the Indian performing arts. How did it all begin for you?
Well, thank you for that question. How did it begin? It started actually maybe before I had an interest in India. I had an interest in East Asian theater, especially the No of Japan. That came when I was an undergraduate at the University of Oklahoma. And then while I was working on my PhD, my roommate, I was trying to decide what to do for a thesis. My roommate in college, an Indian fellow, Anant Negandhi is his name. He's now a doctor. And Anant suggested I do something no one would know anything about, so they couldn't ask me hard questions. So, so I looked through books and I came upon the English language theater in India, and so that's what drew me to go to India. And of course, I had to get the money to do that. So that came about through the Fulbright organization. And so in about 1964, I left for India by ship from New York Harbor and sailed across the Atlantic and the Mediterranean and the Arabian Sea to Bombay. And thus begins the story of me in India.
And I've heard that you've traveled extensively throughout the world, and especially through India and South Asia, in your many years. Would you like to share any interesting anecdotes or stories from your experiences,
Oh,
especially in India?
oh my. Well, when I went to India at the very beginning, I was gathering data on the English language theater in India, and I worked with I was assigned to work at the National School of Drama with Ibram Akazi, who was the head of the National School of Drama, and he had only been head for a few years when I arrived. And so I asked him what he thought I should do, and he said, "Well, just get accustomed to India, especially Delhi, because I was living in Delhi. Get accustomed to Delhi, and then we can talk later." He was a very busy man, and as you know, when people are in charge of something, they have to be very careful about making sure everything goes right. And so while I was doing that, I met a woman who suggested that she would like me to direct a play at Lady Irwin College in Delhi. And so You Can't Take It With You, a famous American play. And so I agreed to do that. And at the same time, she was running a new theater organization, a sort of a not for profit theater organization. And I got cast as a character in Hotel Paradiso, the Fado comedy. And the long and the short of that is that I um, played the opening night before Mrs. Gandhi, who came to see the show, and I met the great lady afterwards. And so it was for a young kid from the U.S. who had never been abroad, this was kind of an exciting moment in my life. So that was one of the things that happened.
Interesting. That's great. Are you currently involved in any research or any work in on Indian theater?
Well, I have been for a long time. I narrowed the focus of my studies later on to Kudiattam, which is the Sanskrit theater of Kerala. And I did so because I was so entranced by the acting style that they use in that art form. And so from that point on, I began to write about Kudiattam. And because it at that time was not well known by, it was only well known by a few people, let's put it that way. And one of them was Clifford Jones, who had finished his PhD at University of Pennsylvania in art history. And Cliff's writings inspired me to begin to investigate Kudiattam more thoroughly. It at the time was not well known at all as a form of theater in India. In fact, there was hardly anything written about it, especially from North Indian art academics. Uh, it was only in Kerala in South India that you found English and Malayalam writing about Kudiattam. So I got engaged in that and learned a sign language, especially learning the sign language used in that art form. And that then pulled me into uh, a desire to do translation from the sign language because I wondered how the audience could understand these very unique signs and how they understood the play through watching the sign language and the facial expressions. So that sort of moved me along in that way. And then the most recent thing that I published happened to be a book on the temples and the way the Kudiattam is related to the Kerala temples. And this was written by my friend and colleague Margi Madhu Chakyar, who's in charge of a theater group in Murikulam, which is a very small town in central, north central Kerala. So that sort of has continued to be something I've been studying and working on.
Interesting. So now the most important question: how did ICS Theater happen, and how did you happen to cross paths with
Ah,
ICS Theater?
that was a very fortunate occasion, a very fortunate occasion. Um, the first show I directed was at the invitation of Miss Barka Kishnani, who asked me to direct and to submit a play that the group might do. And so uh, I was struggling to find something that I thought would be interesting and challenging for the actors because I didn't know what kind of actors there were in the group, and I wasn't quite sure about the environment in which we'd be producing these works. So we came slowly to the decision to use Tartuffe, Moliere's Tartuffe, a comedy, as the first show. And because it had a large enough cast that we could give roles, all the roles are wonderful in the play. So it gave everybody a chance to do something that would challenge their abilities. And then I could find out more about what the actors were like that were available in this organization, and that's where it started with Tartuffe, and that was some time ago. I can't remember the date.
And are there any particular instances or funny anecdotes you might remember from your very first experience working with ICS Theater?
Well, the anecdotes basically, for me, especially things that are of concern to all directors, is how much time you have to work on the stage. And so it always came as a shock to me that uh, the organizations that are functioning in uh, New Brunswick and environments are uh, at the mercy of the theaters in which they work, because basically you have only a few hours of rehearsal time on the stage before you actually show the play to the audience, which in work I've been doing in the past at the University of Georgia and SUNY Stony Brook and Michigan State, uh, we get weeks of rehearsal time to test the lighting, to test the sound system, to set up sets, to do elaborate sort of work. And so it came as a shock to me that all of this had to be crammed into a few hours, sometimes an hour and a half even, which is really shocking. So for any director, it's always a shock to confine themselves to that kind of arrangement.
But all in all, Tartuffe was a success. So I guess that, with all of that, given all of the constraints that you had, I think it all turned out really well.
Well, thank you.
Now, I know you're a very busy man with a lot of varied interests. And apart from directing a gamut of plays here in the US and in India, what are some of your other pursuits and interests?
Well, let's see. I have mostly worked at teaching. My teaching is a principal part of my daily activity. And I started in 1966 at Michigan State University when I was beginning to teach. And teaching has always been challenging for me because I thought I was a better director than I was a teacher. And I still believe that in a certain way. Uh, because you're challenging young minds to rethink how the theater operates and what the theater does. And especially you're working with actors, many of whom are not certain about what their future might be in the field. So I've always felt like a main objective for me was to keep a balance between directing, teaching, and research, so that I wouldn't get one out of sync with the other, and could make sure that I was doing enough writing that would satisfy the university requirements that I keep abreast of my of the art forms that I was studying, and and that I also had given sufficient time to the students in the classroom so that they would feel like they were learning something that they could then build on for the next stage in their career. So it's been a balancing act for me, and wearing a different hat every time you do something. So and so some of the plays that I've directed have been a mixture of plays from India and elsewhere, and principally from the West. So if you want to see some of the photographs of the plays that I've done, I'd be happy to show them to you.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so let's pull up a few of those shots of those plays and see what we've got here. Here we go. And so, okay, this is the last of the plays. This is not the first of the plays. We're going to go backwards. Okay, to the beginning. Okay. So my one of my first plays that I ever directed was The Little Clay Cart, the Sanskrit play by the playwright Basa, which dates from maybe 500 AD. And it's a wonderful play, and very lively and active. And there's a dance scene that we used, and the play was done in the round, so the audience was sitting very close to the actors. Uh, Another one of my plays, after I returned from India after my first visit, was the play Hayavadana, or as we called it, The Transposed Heads by Giddish Karnard. And this was another of those plays at Michigan State, but it was done out of doors during the summer, and which was a wonderful environment because the audience was so close to the actors. You can see the actor in the foreground on that stage that's been defined there. Um, Another of the plays that I directed was Sakaram Binder, serious play, very close to the audience. This is Lakshmi, the first of the wives or the women that Sakaram keeps at his household. And Sakaram was played in the right, the guy that plays him is played by an Iranian actor who was a graduate student at University, Michigan State University. Then I decided to do something for children. So I worked with Panchatantra, the fun short little stories, and tied them together and created various and sundry pieces from the Panchatantra, which ran about maybe 40 minutes or so in length. This is a piece called Oh Rats. And if you know the Panchatantra, you'll know what I'm talking about. Then I also moved to East Asia and worked with No Theater of Japan. And we had a classical No actor come to Michigan State at one point in time. And so I was inspired to direct this Medea, a No cycle by Carol Sorgenfrey, who is at uh, University of California, UCLA. I also, in the Western side of things, I tended to focus on more challenging works like The Infernal Machine by Jean Cocteau. This is a very stylized work, and we used kind of stylized costumes. Much of the setting that you see here is actually humans inside these pieces that are transformed into characters. Uh, and the whole play, The Infernal Machine, is about the journey of Oedipus from his youthfulness to himself as the king, and the eventual character that you find in Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex. And this is the character that he turns out to be as the play progresses, wearing this stylized mask and a very stylized costume. He's standing on very high stilts, so it makes the character much bigger. Again, this was a play that was done in the round. That's the way it looked. That's the way it eventually ends at the end of the play. Also, we used costumes from the Greek period to suggest the guards that guard the king. And then at one point in time, I opened a whole theater. The first time any play had ever been done on the stage in this theater. This was the festival stage at Michigan State University. Millions of dollars were spent in building this structure. And so we did two plays, one of them on the Fairchild Theater, which was part of the university's theater complement, and part on the festival stage. And this is Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, which was staged on that wonderful stage. And it shows we spent a lot of money on costumes and set. I think we spent something like $30,000 for the set, costumes, and props. A scene from the end of the play, the mechanicals are playing a scene before the Theseus, the Duke, and the young lovers who've just returned from the forest, having gotten into the right pairings, are seen as the play is progressing and watching the mechanicals perform. And then a young man who's playing a minor role but carrying a fantastic prop, which was made in our prop shop at Michigan State. Also in the theater around at Michigan State, I did a play by Racine's Phaedra, and this is Theseus from that play. And I did a lot of more realistic plays, like Rainmaker by Nash, which is a very wonderful realistic play about having faith in someone that you don't trust, but ultimately he leads you into a wonderful experience as a performer. This is a scene that takes place between the lovers in Rainmaker. Uh, Making use of things that exist in real life was something I was keenly interested in Jesus Christ Superstar. So Kiss, the rock group Kiss, I transported to being. These are the meant to be the Jewish masters of a temple that happens in Jesus Christ Superstar. And at one point, there's a very spectacular dance routine, and we thought of it as being set on a Las Vegas stage. So that's why we designed the costumes and the splendor of the thing. The end of the play, the very final scene of the play, is the whole cast is on stage, and Superstar is written out on the back as you're watching this show. This was played on a 3,000 seat theater that was full. So we sold 3,000 seats for two performances of this work. And more realistic work like this at the State University of New York at Stony Brook was Oleana by David Mamet, and a scene from a final scene from Oleana. Okay, so that's about enough of that. So I've been working on a number of plays of different kinds and varieties. Those are challenging to me. Not everybody chooses to do such a wide variety of plays, but I've decided this is going to be something I'm going to constantly try to do.
Wow, that is really impressive.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
this is why at ICS Theater we consider ourselves lucky to have you directing us.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Very kind of you.
Um, Coming to the question about the current situation now, when the pandemic hit last year, the
Mm.
world switched over to doing everything remotely, and so did the arts, of course. In your experience, how has technology helped or hindered theater productions and the performing arts?
Well, I think that we're into a system now that we can't back out of in terms of use of technology. Uh, Technology is used a great deal in contemporary theater in the West, particularly. And you see that in the kinds of shows that are produced in New York and in Paris and other parts of the world where Western theater is done, the use of computers, especially. So that when I was at Stony Brook, one of our directors wanted to use computers as part of his production and computers operated all sorts of things. We did simultaneously 8 plays running at the same time in one space, so that the audience actually moved from space to space, whatever attracted their attention. So at one moment they could go and watch part of one play, and then they were led to another part and could watch another part. And they could even affect the dialogue simply by moving their hand. The computer picked up the sensitivity of that and translated it into a part of the dialogue from the play they were watching. So it's been a challenge to work in this way. So one of the reasons I came to Georgia was because we had a very sophisticated technologies organization at the university. And so we've done a number of plays in which computers have played a major role. And they've been used in costumes, they've been used in sets, they've been used in, we actually build props with 3D printers. So we actually have props built out of plastic. And all you have to do is give the instruction to the equipment and it turns out the prop. So I think we're into a different kind of world. It's a little scary because you don't know, are you going to lose the humanness and the directness of relationship between the audience and the actors by having so much technology used? That's a big question. I don't know where the answers are, but I do think that we're not going to stop doing it. I think we're going to try to find ways to do it more effectively.
Now, when theaters and stages do open up again, which I'm sure they will as soon as we have this pandemic under control, what production do you have in mind that you would like to stage next with ICS Theater?
Well, I don't have anything specific, except I would say that I would really like to do a comedy. I'm itching to do another comedy of some sort. And I've thought about doing things with masks. I may have said this to you earlier, but I feel like that the use of masks can be very effective on the stage. And you can change the way a person talks and the way they look. Oh, young lady. Hello. Hello. And so masks, I think, would be a challenge for actors in your organization. These are from Bali. These are hand carved wooden masks, and this one's a full mask. Is a little harder to hear the voices in a full mask, but it's still possible. So I'm thinking of something that would be half masks, use of the half mask, which was popular during the 17th century with the traveling troops of Italian actors that were going through Europe and especially through France. So it strikes me that it would be kind of fun to try doing a play with masks. So that's for what it's worth. We have to get somebody who wants to let us do it now.
So there you have it, folks. We at ICS Theater are eagerly looking forward to working with Dr. Richmond in person once again and to keep bringing you awesome powerhouse performances like we have done before in the past 7 years. Thank you so much, Dr. Richmond, for taking the time and speaking with us today.
Thank you, Anita. Take care.
And on that note, I would like to end today's show with a quote by Simon Callow from his book Charles Dickens and the Great Theatre of the World. To enter a theatre for a performance is to be inducted into a magical space, to be ushered into the sacred arena of the imagination. I hope you are all eagerly awaiting to be inducted into the magical space of theatre, because ICS Theatre sure as heck cannot wait to usher you in with open arms. That's it from me today, folks. Again, I'm your host, Anita Mantri, signing off. I'll see you next time on Center Stage with ICS Theater. Until then, please mask up, stay safe, and support the arts. Thank you all for watching and have a great night.